Ah, ja. Jetzt sind alle zu sehen. So I think we will start. Good evening to everybody, especially here, to all people who found their way to this event, despite of the fact that Eintracht Frankfurt is tonight in a soccer game against Chelsea London in the semi-final of the EuroLeague, which is a real surprise, and we of course couldn't know as we set this date for the Skype conference. Well deserved, of course, yeah. And of course, welcome to all participants. I just want to say a few words concerning the European Press Club Federation, which has been founded about, I don't know exactly, about 30 years ago. And Frankfurt was one of the co-founders. And a meeting is every year, and the presidency of this federation is changing every year. And in Frankfurt, the last time was the assembly of the European Federation of Press Clubs in 2012. And so for 1 year, we also had the presidency, which is now in Lille, in northern France. This press club federation allows every member of all press clubs who are members of this federation to have the same rights when visiting this town as their own members. So you can take part in the assemblies there and so on. But it's now, and we said we have a meeting every year and exchanging our experiences and developing common ideas and so on. But it's now the first time in Frankfurt, and maybe even the first time in the history of the federation, that we take the opportunity to have this chance for every member also of the press clubs to be in contact with them, with other members of the Press Club Federation. And now especially welcome to Jarosław in Warsaw, Jarosław Wodalczyk.
Good afternoon.
Dobry wieczór, good afternoon. Dann Daniela Kraus in Wien. Guten Abend.
Hello. Guten Abend.
Hello.
Hallo.
And Philippe Alien in Lille. Bonsoir, Philippe. It seems that he doesn't hear me, but we hope he will hear us when he is in order to tell us something. Ist er ganz weg. So war es nicht gemeint. And later, about 8:30, we still have a guest from Bucharest, Attila Biro, a journalist from Romania, which is actually in Berlin tonight, but he will be later in the conference. So Jarosław, as I told you, we start with you. Poland is, okay, no, one word still before. We have two themes. The focus is, of course, on press freedom, because tomorrow is the International Day of Press Freedom. And on the 26th of May, and in some countries a little earlier, is the election of the European Parliament. But the main topic is, of course, the press freedom. And we have such a ranging of the organization Reporters Without Frontiers. And so Poland has the place 59 out of 180. So it's Alice, it's the last place from the participating countries tonight. Jarosław, what is the reason? What is the problem with press freedom in Poland?
Before I will start to say what is the problem with press freedom in Poland, which in some fields is. Thank you, Gerhard and Frankfurter Press Club, for making this opportunity to discuss. And according to the Reporters Without Borders report, I just want to highlight that the methodology is slightly different than Freedom House is doing in New York, meaning the RSF report is a little bit prediction what will happen in the future than based on the facts, which is important because it's initiating the discussion, although I would be very careful about RSF report as a description of the current situation. Anyway, when I was thinking what to tell you, I divided the situation of media in Poland and problems of media in Poland to 5 groups. So one is organizational and financial. And after this year, we celebrate 30 years of the collapse of the communism. And still the media market in Poland is quite shallow and small, which is making it's always a threat to the independence of media. And also the advertising market depends a lot on state or partly state-owned companies. And recently we had a report of the Supreme Audit Office, which is the parliament institution to control the public spendings. And because we don't have any rules or transparency how state-owned or partly state-owned companies are spending money on media, they noticed that private television stations competing with public television, which is fully controlled by government since always, but now the money is transferred from private stations to state television, which is making very complicated financial situation for private television stations, because this public or partly public money is important input in their advertising budget. Secondly, for the printed press, we are facing now the bankruptcy of the biggest distributor of the press, owner of most of the newsstands in Poland, the company called Ruch. First of all, this company owns fortunes to the publishers of the biggest newspapers, weeklies and monthlies. And secondly, we know that it will be bought by the largest company in Central Eastern Europe, Orlen, which is owner of the oil company, the gas stations, etc., and now the sponsor of one of the Formula One teams. On the other hand, they've got a big package of shares belonging to the state. So the distribution of the press will be in big part controlled by, not directly, but indirectly by the state. So that's the first, the organizational and financial issues. The second is attacks on journalists' rights. So we are facing mostly from the ruling party, Law and Justice, and from government, attacks on the confidentiality of the source of the information, as well as meaning the prosecution, which is controlled by the Minister of Justice, is sending to the courts requests to in individual cases to break the confidentiality of the source of the information for journalists. The second thing is using of the state institutions against journalists in civil proceeding. For instance, when one minister, former Minister of Defense, was against some publications, instead of private civil proceeding, he was using public prosecution to check the issue. And all of that is going to, we treat it as a expectation of the freezing effect, which, as you everybody know, might work. Fortunately, in Poland, it's not working. Journalists are feeling independent, and even when receiving fines, they are paying the fines, but not breaking the confidentiality of the source of the information. Also, the government used to say about deconcentration or repolonization of the media, but still these plans didn't happen. So we cannot say if it's gonna have influence on media, although
what does it mean, this repolonization? Several newspapers are owned by foreign companies, and they want to have them back to Polish owners.
Yes, yes. The problem is that the best example is the largest newspaper in Poland, called Polska The Times, is owned by one of the regional German publishers, Passauer. And
Passauer Neue Presse, yeah.
yes, but speaking frankly, if someone will come to Passauer and will say, I will give you 200 million euro, probably they will sell it next day. But who is going to pay it? This is not such a lucrative business like it was 15 or 20 years ago.
And only in Poland, yeah.
Yeah, so of course, politicians, expecting the freezing effect, they can make such promises, but everybody realizes if they would buy these newspapers, then the circulation would go down, and at the end of the day, ruling party will not have the effect expected, bigger influence on the information market. So we are not very afraid of it. There are other things we face threats. The third part is access to information, which is, as you know, very important for all journalists. And access to information, we are facing the same what is in the US, in Israel, and in many places now all over the world. So it's a very common politicians' behavior now, not answering the questions, regulation of the access of journalists, or even not organizing press conferences. Donald Trump is organizing only briefings, not too many questions from the media which are not friendly. Bibi Netanyahu is not making press conferences at all. And for instance, Speaker of the lower house of the Polish Parliament, during almost 3.5 years term, didn't make even one press conference. So this is very difficult. Even Prime Minister, when it's making press conference, it's always difficult to ask more than one question. He's not answering the question. And when there is a crisis in any topic, like we recently had a protests of teachers and the school system, the schools didn't work for almost 2 weeks. And when we had a press conferences, we couldn't ask a question to the Minister of Education because the lady was hidden somehow, and Vice Prime Minister was speaking, answering questions very often when they were difficult with the answer, I don't know. The fourth thing I would like to state is, in our opinion, of the press club, it's not enough protection of journalists in law to defend physical attacks. We noticed a series of physical attacks, some politically inspired, some not. Because when you make investigative reporting and showing that someone is polluting the river, and then security of the company is coming and attacking reporter who was doing that, we cannot say there is any political background in that, although politicians should, understanding the role of journalists in democracy and in controlling the system, should do more. As a press club, Polish press club, we prepared the proposition of legislation of better protection of journalists.
These physical attacks are during their service or on the street, or how?
Yes. There are very different situations, so I don't want to take too much time on it, but there are happening from time to time. On some demonstration, one television station broadcasting car was fired. On another, journalists from public television were pushed and beaten by the supporters of the opposition. So it's coming from both sides of the political conflict. It's the very high temperature of this political fight, and journalists from private media or public media are the targets of physical attacks. It's not happening every day, but it's happening, let's say, once a month, once another month. So we
too often.
Yeah, too often. So what we proposed the legislation, and both former President of Poland Komorowski and current President Duda, they don't see the need of better protection of journalists in Poland, and especially, as you can imagine, more and more journalists are freelancers, so they don't have even legal support from media outlets, because they are freelancers, not the full-time journalists. And
maybe one of the reasons that there are so many freelancers now is that more than 200 journalists were fired by the public broadcasting after the government, the National Conservative Government Party, Law and Justice, brought it under control. Is it true? And I heard fired or forced to resign.
You mean with this government or former government?
This government.
Okay, former.
That's I read. I don't know.
Yeah. Gerhard, you are absolutely right. The former government of Prime Minister Tusk fired 400 journalists from public television news services, forced them to resign and to go to the transition time before fired of from 1 to 2 years. So the first big earthquake in public television was during former government.
So the Liberal Party, the Conservative Liberal Party, was not better than now the national one?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. Mm-hmm. And no, speaking frankly, the former government, when Donald Tusk was a prime minister, did something which we will never forget. When we had a tape scandal in one of the restaurants, prominent politicians of Liberal Party, Citizen Platform were recorded. Then when One Weekly published it, Prime Minister, his office and his officers sent police, prosecution and Secret Service to media outlet to grab all the data and recordings. And every media in Poland protested against it. But now the situation is not better, I would say, from the perspective that more and more journalists are losing jobs. In public media, correct what you said, about 200 people were forced to go, not to quit the job. Also, even in Gazeta Wyborcza, the biggest liberal daily, we've got similar situation. A lot of journalists were forced to leave, most only because of economical reasons. This is not a political inspired situation, but because of economical reasons, which I started from, that when you've got less money, you have to reduce the size of the team. So, and the last fifth issue I want to mention, this is the disinformation and fake news. And this is the big issue, which I believe without support, because we are just before European elections, until European Commission and European Parliament will not understand that not individual media outlet or individual politicians cannot systematically fight with disinformation and fake news, it will be possible having few million euro to destabilize situation in Europe, including elections, including decisions, and it may come both what is investigated now in Britain and the US, the influence of Russia and Russian military disinformation unit with trolls, etc.
Okay.
But also when we speak, for instance, about the latest legislation of directive on copyright in the digital single market, which is, I believe, very good legislation for media, we have seen how huge disinformation and fake news campaign was made by the internet giants, Facebook and Google, against it. That also shows that business and international corporation can destabilize the news ecosystem.
Okay, thank you. What we learned, in my opinion, is that too much influence by the government or by the state for public broadcasting is always bad. If there is a liberal party ruling or a conservative party, it doesn't make so much difference, but it's generally bad, I think, so much influence by the state. And I would now like to change to the next press club. First, I want to say what I forgot at the beginning to say, that Jarosław is also the president of the International Association of Press Clubs.
I'm Secretary General.
Secretary General.
The president every other year elected and
president,
a permanent position.
But in former times, the Secretary General was the most important.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, so we change now. Maybe later we come back to the question of the parliament, of the election of parliament. But let's stay at the press freedom. Let's change to France, to Lille, Club de la Presse Hauts-de-France, also in northern France. Philippe Allien, who is actually the president of the European Press Club Federation. France, on the same range as I already mentioned by Reporters Since Without Borders, is on the 32nd place, so one place better than last year. Are there any problems in such a democratic country like France, also with press freedom? Philippe?
Hello, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Oui.
Just a second, we have a problem with the
Excusez-moi,
transmission.
mon anglais étant très mauvais, j'ai demandé à Roxana de m'aider et qui va traduire en simultané, j'espère. Alors, les problèmes
Could you try in English, because I don't know if everybody understands French. Oder es hilft jemand, genau. Ja. Okay, start again, because there was a technical problem.
Can you understand?
Now we hear you. Philip, we hear you. Dachte ich.
Yes. So I can speak French. In France, en France, bien sûr, nous sommes venus à la 32e place, c'était 38, je crois, l'an passé. Les problèmes sont multiples. Excuse me,
okay.
A little moment.
Okay, now we have translated already what you said, but
so
go on.
I'm sorry, I am the translator. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you well.
Okay.
Thanks that you help with translation.
Le problème en France ne tient pas vraiment à un régime politique, il tient, à mon sens,
For him, the problem isn't tied to the political regime, actually.
il tient à la personnalité des gouvernants, des présidents.
He believes that it is more relied to the personality of the people in charge.
Nous avons eu successivement le président Nicolas Sarkozy à partir de 2007.
President Nicolas Sarkozy, from 2007,
très proche de la presse, mais,
very close to the newspapers,
mais très ami avec les groupes comme celui de Monsieur Vincent Bolloré.
He's very close to the group of Vincent Bolloré.
Très proche également, sous bien des aspects. Et M. Sarkozy s'est montré souvent très peu agréable avec les journalistes.
He was often not very nice to journalists, as you can remember.
Il n'hésitait pas à tenser, à gronder, à menacer des journalistes sur les plateaux de télévision.
He threatened journalists even in front of television where people could see it.
Sarkozy,
Il y avait bien sûr il y avait évidemment des conséquences pour l'ensemble de la presse.
Was subsequent consequences on the altogether press of France at that point.
Un peu de vérité, un peu de paranoïa. Bon.
There was some truth in it. There was some paranoia from journalists.
Et puis, son successeur, François Hollande, lui, a joué le jeu ami-ami, copain-copain avec la presse.
So the next president actually tried to do it even better and to become a real friend or the best friend of the press.
Hollande.
Résultat, François Hollande. Résultat, il s'est laissé aller à des confidences qu'il n'aurait peut-être pas dû faire. Enfin, il est allé trop loin dans ce relationnel.
For him, Hollande, he went actually too far, and he said some confidential things that he should have never told the press.
Maintenant, nous avons Emmanuel Macron, qui est un jeune président, et qui vient avec une jeune équipe de techniciens.
Very young team of technicians.
Des gens très sûrs d'eux,
confident,
très technocrates,
and very technocrats.
Qui n'ont aucun sentiment,
Feelings.
Aucun état d'âme,
No feelings.
pas de, ouais, et un directeur de communication, un directeur de cabinet est capable de dire d'un journaliste, c'est un imbécile.
His team actually said that some of the journalists in France are idiots.
Il y a un an,
Who said this? The communication chief. Okay.
Sylvain Faure, conseiller du président.
is one of the people that is very close to the president.
Il y a un an, la personne qui aujourd'hui est porte-parole du Premier ministre,
1 year ago, the spokesperson of the prime minister,
Sibeth Ndiaye,
Beth Ndiaye,
il y a un an, elle était à l'Élysée
she was at the Elysee last year.
et elle faisait la police parmi les journalistes.
She thought that she was a kind of policewoman for journalists,
Très autoritaire.
very authoritative.
Les choses ont beaucoup changé en ce sens où les relations entre le pouvoir et l'État se sont tellement détendues
For him, the relationship between the press and the government have become much more relaxed.
qu'on n'a plus de limites et on n'a plus aucun respect pour la presse. On s'en méfie même.
And for him, there is no more respect for the press, and we do not take it for granted.
Nicolas Sarkozy disait, vous n'êtes pas des professionnels, vous devriez poser telle ou telle question.
Sarkozy used to say, "You are not professional. You should take this question or that question."
Emmanuel Macron dit, ce n'est pas à vous que je veux avoir affaire, choisissez-moi quelqu'un d'autre.
Emmanuel Macron says, "I do not want to speak with you. I want to speak with someone else."
On va de plus en plus loin.
So going further and further with every president.
C'est un point qui n'est pas qui est important. Maintenant, le problème qui se pose à la presse, c'est un peu ce que j'entendais tout à l'heure pour la Pologne.
He believes that the problem that we have in France, it is one that might be similar with the one that we spoke before with Pologne.
C'est l'argent, ce sont les grands groupes industriels qui possèdent les journaux.
We have economic groups that have shares in newspapers.
Exemple, Bolloré, encore lui, Vivaldi.
Vivaldi.
Les chaînes de télévision qui appartiennent à ces groupes et la presse écrite.
The channels and written newspapers that are actually owned by these people, important and very rich people.
Par exemple, vont avoir beaucoup de mal à faire une enquête sur le Togo, par exemple.
For them, it will be very difficult to write on, for example, Togo.
Parce que Vivaldi a beaucoup investi là-bas. Il y a beaucoup d'intérêts financiers.
Because some of these people, some of the persons that have a lot of money, they have interests in Africa or in countries where there are problems to be talked about.
Sur la radio publique,
The national radio.
Il n'est pas facile pour les journalistes de parler de l'Arabie saoudite en termes critiques.
It is very hard to speak about the Southern Arabia.
Parce que là, le gouvernement a des intérêts avec l'Arabie saoudite, donc il ne faut pas trop les chatouiller. Intérêts économiques, bien sûr, et géopolitiques, géostratégiques.
Because France has interest in South Arabia, especially for what is petrol and oils, and so people cannot speak freely about it on the radio.
Troisième élément.
A third element.
Nous avons à faire face à des lois, à une législation qui évolue.
Are definitely evolving today in France.
Par exemple, ça fait très longtemps que cela a démarré. On veut, mais vous connaissez cela aussi chez vous, dans vos pays respectifs, j'imagine, s'en prendre au secret des sources. Dites-nous qui vous a renseigné lorsqu'il s'agit de choses importantes, stratégiques pour le pouvoir.
Confidentiality of source is one of the problems that you might be common with, all three of you, and it is one in France now.
Il y a déjà longtemps que la police se permet d'aller dans les chaînes de télévision et de saisir des enregistrements.
It has been a long time, police going in TV channels and trying to go and actually take proofs and that should be confidential.
Et on invoque des raisons de sécuritaires.
Because it is for safety, for governmental reasons, or whatever.
Autre chose, il y a, je développerai peut-être tout à l'heure, un très grand développement de ce que l'on appelle les fake news, les fausses informations.
Yeah, there is a very, very big rise in fake news in France.
Le gouvernement a voulu mettre en place, créer une loi contre les auteurs de fake news.
So in France, there was this new legislation that was proposed in order to limit fake news.
Il ne s'est pas rendu compte qu'en faisant cela, il ne fait que produire de nouvelles fausses informations, de nouvelles fake news.
But in this way, actually, government got the opposite result because more and more fake news appeared.
Autre élément, les gens n'ont plus confiance aux journalistes, de moins en moins.
He believes that people today in France, normal people, just do not trust newspapers anymore.
On l'a très bien vu avec ce que l'on appelle la crise des gilets jaunes.
And it is to see in the cries of the yellow vests.
C'est très complexe, mais il s'avère que les grands journaux, la presse mainstream, comme on dit,
The mainstream press or the most important journals
est souvent très éloignée des réalités de la vie quotidienne des gens.
actually do not tell the reality of the all day and everyday life of French people.
La vie sociale, la réalité.
Social life and the reality.
Et à l'inverse, les gens que l'on appelle ceux de la France d'en bas, les plus pauvres,
the poorest people in France,
qui sont quand même très nombreux,
that are a lot in France today.
9 millions de travailleurs pauvres en France.
We have 9 million workers, poor workers in France today.
Là, évidemment, ne se sentent pas reconnus, représentés à la télévision.
They do not feel nor represented or recognized in television.
Les présentateurs de journalistes télévision gagnent beaucoup d'argent, même sur la chaîne publique.
Journalists will actually gain a lot of money, even if it is in public government-owned television.
Et, à tort ou à raison, on les accuse d'être à la solde du pouvoir.
And we actually accuse those journalists to be bought by the government.
Pas seulement le pouvoir politique, mais aussi le pouvoir économique, les grands patrons.
Yes.
Vous travaillez pour Vivendi, vous défendez Vivendi. Vous travaillez pour Bolloré, vous défendez Bolloré. Vous n'êtes pas dans notre camp.
So journalists actually are considered to be defending on one side the government and on the other side actually big investors or owners of big companies.
Voilà.
On the other hand, if I may ask a question, on the other hand, we hear that often during the protests of the yellow vests, journalists are physically attacked. I don't know by whom, or by the participants or by anybody else. And is this a real problem for journalists? Is it so often?
Pendant les manifestations, et souvent même physiquement, est-ce que c'est la police ou les autres participants qui vont
alors, les gilets jaunes, c'est très compliqué. Il y a parmi les gilets jaunes, qui est un mouvement très, très divers, très hétéroclite, très mélangé.
The Yellow Vest movement is actually a very complex and big movement. So,
au départ, les gilets jaunes, ce sont des classes moyennes qui revendiquent contre la hausse de l'essence.
So basically,
carburant.
You should already know about it, but the Gilets jaunes or Yellow Vest movement was born with just medium class people that wanted some revendication for their salaries because they were too small.
Aujourd'hui, c'est très divers, c'est un véritable mouvement social.
And it has transformed into a social movement.
Avec des gens de droite, des gens de gauche, des gens apolitiques, il y a de tout.
We have actually people coming from the far left or far right or center, people that do not give anything about politics anymore.
But the attacks on TV teams, for example, during the protests? Are they by the are they by the police or by the protesters or by both sides?
Les attaques sur les journalistes, est-ce qu'il s'agit
De,
des... He said that's both of them.
les gilets jaunes, les journalistes, au début, n'ont pas compris ce que voulaient dire les gilets jaunes. C'est quelque chose qui est complètement inédit, original. Ce n'est pas une révolution, ce n'est pas, bon, c'est un mouvement de grande ampleur, qui couvre toute la France, toutes les couches de la société, mais c'est inédit. On n'a jamais vu ça.
So he believes that journalists, at first, they didn't understand what the Yellow Vest movement was because it is so new. It cannot be called an actual revolution. It's something so new that they didn't know how to cope with it.
Donc les journalistes n'ont pas compris au début. Les syndicats n'ont pas compris. Les syndicats, les organisations syndicales, la CGT par exemple.
Workers' organization like in France, they didn't understand it as well.
Il y a eu un mouvement de rejet.
There was this kind of refusal.
Donc, il y a eu des attaques contre les journalistes.
So there was an attack for
Gilets
journalists.
jaunes. De la part des gilets jaunes. Ça n'est pas bien, ça n'est pas excusable. Mais on peut comprendre.
So even if it is because they were attacked because they didn't understand les gilets jaunes, we cannot excuse them.
Et c'est les résultats de 30 ans, de 40 ans de fossé entre deux classes sociales qui s'affrontent.
For him, it is the 30 or 40 years ongoing of separation between these two classes, two social classes, because we have the workers on one side and journalists on other.
Mais qui s'affrontent de façon soft.
They actually they go together, they cope with the fight, but it's a soft fight.
Avec la force de l'habitude. On ne se rend pas compte, à part quelques exceptions. Par exemple, une journaliste en France, Laurence Aubenas, n'hésite pas à aller sur le terrain, à rencontrer vraiment les gens. Mais il y a très peu de journalistes de Paris qui le font.
He says that there are very few journalists that actually go on the field and try to talk with people and understand their situation.
Mais ils ont un discours qui a tendance, d'après les Gilets jaunes, à défendre le pouvoir auquel eux-mêmes s'attaquent.
And the Gilets jaunes attack journalists for defending the political regime.
Là-dessus viennent se greffer des Gilets jaunes extrémistes, d'extrême droite, fascistes.
Yeah, we have some fascist Gilets jaunes.
Donc là, récupèrent la chose et ils attaquent les journalistes. Ils mettent le feu aux rédactions, par exemple. Ils essayent. On l'a vu ici dans le Nord.
Yes, here in the north, actually near Lille, they attacked journalists. Gilets jaunes attacked journalists.
And far right does it mean the Front National or Mouvement Rassemblement National has also influence inside of the Gilets jaunes? Yellow Vest?
Est-ce que les gens du Front National font partie des Gilets jaunes?
Marine Le Pen a essayé de récupérer.
Yes, Marine Le Pen from Front National, she tried to get at the head of the movement.
Ça n'a pas marché, mais il y a des gens parmi les Gilets jaunes qui sont Front National ou encore pire.
We have some people in the Gilets jaunes movement that actually are far right or even worse.
Mais il n'y a pas que ça. Dans l'opposition politique, Monsieur Mélenchon, qui représente une partie de la gauche,
Mélenchon, he's at the left part,
et qui se dit lui-même populiste de gauche.
He says about himself that he is populist.
Que Mélenchon a prouvé, montre ses muscles contre les journalistes. Il déteste la presse, il déteste les journalistes.
Mélenchon, he was one of the candidates to become president. He is fighting on and on journalists.
Il attaque les jeunes journalistes, les étudiants.
He attacks young journalists like students.
Il les traite de petits bourgeois.
him, they are just little bourgeois, so medium class
Les
citizens,
autres, il les traite d'incompétents,
and the other ones are just useless
voire d'imbéciles.
idiots.
I
Et
heard
encore une
that
fois,
Mélenchon, this far left
Yes.
candidate for presidency, that he is shouting to journalists also as idiots and liars and betrayers. Why does he so?
Il a dit pourquoi Mélenchon il appelle les journalistes menteurs ou traîtres, des choses comme ça.
Parce qu'il considère que les journalistes cherchent toujours, lui posent trop de questions en fait, ils ne sont pas suffisamment sur sa ligne. Et lui, il est comment je vais dire, c'est quelqu'un de très rigide qui supporte très mal la discussion.
He believes that Mélenchon is because he doesn't want too many questions, and he believes that journalists just ask too many questions. He's not open to debating.
On ne
It's a
verra
common
jamais cela.
illness of journalists.
Ouais.
Il a dit les questions, c'est quelque chose de commun entre parmi tous les journalistes. De poser plein de questions.
Bien sûr, c'est normal, mais lui, il est très atrabilaire, très coléreux. Et donc, en même temps, il a besoin des journalistes, il est toujours sur les plateaux télé. C'est je t'aime, moi non plus.
So actually, he needs journalists as any politician. He is always on TV channels and responding, but on the other side, he will insult them.
Alors là, tout ça, ça fait un contexte.
One question, please, concerning yellow vests. Does Macron or his government try to influence reports about them, especially of the public broadcasting?
Donc, il a dit que une question sur les gilets jaunes, est-ce que Macron il a essayé d'influencer les journalistes sur l'opinion sur son écrit des gilets jaunes?
On ne peut pas dire cela, on ne peut pas dire cela comme ça, mais c'est plus insidieux que cela. Les journalistes qui se font agresser dans les manifestations ne le sont pas seulement par les gilets jaunes, ils le sont aussi par la police.
So he says that actually journalists that are attacked, as you said, it isn't always yellow vest, but it is also the government. So
certains journalistes qui sont trop critiques ou qui défendent trop les gilets jaunes ont des problèmes. Et l'un d'entre eux a été interdit de manifestation la semaine passée. Interdit par le pouvoir, par le peuple.
Actually, a journalist that is very, very supportive of the Gilets jaunes was banned from the manifestations, from the demonstration of the Gilets jaunes. So
banned by the government or by whom? By whom banned?
By the government.
Le préfet.
He was the prefect, it's coming from.
But how can the government ban a journalist from those manifestations? With which means?
Comment il fait un gouvernement pour pouvoir interdire une personne de participer?
Il dit que le journaliste a pris part à des actes de violence contre les policiers.
So he was supposedly he participated in some aggressive actions against the police. So
he was pursued by the justice, or?
Il a dit c'est par la justice, ça passe par la justice ou...
C'est une décision du préfet et puis ça peut passer devant un tribunal. Mais en attendant, si le préfet prend une décision, le temps que la justice se décide, la police va l'empêcher de passer.
So it will at last maybe go in front of a judge, but for now it is not the case, but he is still banned. In the meanwhile.
Puis le gouvernement n'a pas non plus beaucoup apprécié que des journalistes prennent part au grand débat qu'il a organisé pour répondre aux questions des Gilets jaunes. Il n'a pas apprécié les commentaires sur le fait qu'il a répondu au grand débat et aux Gilets jaunes, mais sans apporter de réelles réponses, sans être concret.
Actually, there was a big discussion around le grand débat, the big debate of Macron and the Gilets jaunes, and actually Macron hated the how newspapers tended to report this because in reality, he didn't actually answer the question of the Gilets jaunes, and newspapers just told it in the newspapers.
Moi, je crois qu'il y a une prise de conscience énorme de la population en général sur l'importance de la formation. Les petits problèmes, ce ne sont pas des petits problèmes. Attaquer un journaliste est très grave. Mais il y a quand même une vraie prise de conscience de la population sur l'importance de la formation. L'information en général, être informé, avoir la vraie information.
For him, actually, just the French population is becoming more and more interested and more aware of the fact that they have to be informed.
Et le système libéral, ultralibéral, que défendent de plus en plus les États européens, dont la France de M. Macron, s'accommode très mal de la fluidité de l'information.
And he believes that the ultra-liberal France and the other states of Europe, they in some way impede the fluidity of information.
On a
Okay.
été très surpris. Pardon?
Yeah, no, conclude, please.
Voilà, donc le paysage journalistique est en train d'évoluer à cause de toutes ces raisons-là. Des lois qui ne sont pas toujours bien à propos, liberticides.
He believes that now there are just some little facts that are evolving, and some elements like laws that just are not in favor of the freedom of press.
Un climat social qui évolue.
There is this social movement and social climate that is evolving in France.
Des groupes industriels qui sont prédominants.
The industrial groups and owned companies that are very important.
Une perte de confiance dans l'information traditionnelle.
And, most of all, there are people that are not trusting the traditional forms of information.
Et des journalistes, pour finir, qui gagnent très peu d'argent parce qu'il n'y a pas de télévision. Il y a un appauvrissement, une précarisation, un appauvrissement du métier de journaliste. Un jeune journaliste gagne très peu d'argent, il n'a pas les moyens de travailler.
The most important is that journalists today, they gain less and less money.
C'est très dangereux pour la démocratie.
And it's a very, very dangerous fact for democracy in general.
So a problem for the press is, of course, also the economy, and is a special economy concerning media. But as we learned now, also in such a liberal country or with a liberal government, there are problems for the press. So is Bucharest already? No. So then I would like to change. We come back to you. We would like to change to Vienna, to Daniela Kraus, the
Hello.
General Secretary of the Vienna Press Club Concordia. And as we heard now, you have a big theme concerning press freedom with the public broadcasting, because one of the main presenter of Zeit im Bild attacked. You maybe can better explain it.
Yeah,
What
sure.
happened?
First, hello and thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here, more or less. Yes, we have a huge debate on press freedom now in Austria, because in Germany, I know that you know it. I don't know how much this story was followed in France and in Poland, but we had some attacks on the anchor. Armin Wolf is his name. He's the most prominent journalist in Austria, and he presents the main news broadcast at the public broadcaster. And he was attacked by the head of the Freedom Party, not by the Vice Chancellor, but by the
General Secretary.
General Secretary. Because the anchor presented the General Secretary with an anti-Semitic drawing by one of the groups of the Freedom Party. And so the General Secretary said, this will not remain without consequences on air. And there was the party threatened the anchor to throw him out of his job. and there is a huge debate now. However, I mean, this is maybe the climax so far. I'm afraid not. It won't remain the climax. This is the climax so far. But there is there has been a row of single cases of attacks against journalists during the last year, and it's increasing. It's not decreasing. So as you might have followed in the Reporters Without Borders press freedom ranking, Austria fell down. Well, you may say it's not so bad to number 16 from 11. So Reporters Without Borders said Austria loses its white record. So this is due to these many individual cases or single cases, but now they add up to a pattern you can see. So in my opinion, the pattern is to systematically reduce the credibility first of the public broadcaster, but then of the press. And of course, the party that is behind that is the right-wing FPÖ, Freedom Party. But still, I wouldn't say that the Austrian People's Party, so the party of Chancellor Kurz, is without any fault here. Because, for example, the minister who is responsible for media recently said to another anchor, "You are talking nonsense on air," which is a style which wouldn't have been, it's not common. It's really totally atypical. The chancellor said one of the public broadcasting radio stations, he did a press release and he said what they are doing is the ultimate form of false information. So this is unseen. But of course, this all happens just before there will a new law for the public broadcaster will be brought in operation. We don't know exactly, but we expect it for summer. And there's also a huge discussion about to finance the public broadcaster, because now it's financed via fees. And what is the discussion is to finance it from the budget, the Danish model. That's the discussion here.
From the state budget or what?
Yeah, from the state budget, and with the need to negotiate the budget every year or 2 years, which of course would not help to make the public broadcaster independent. I mean, maybe there might be possibilities, but we are not optimistic if that comes, that it will be to save the public broadcaster from influence. So as I said before, I think all this escalation, also with Armin Wolf, with the public broadcaster, is to reduce the credibility of the public broadcaster. But also there, what was mentioned by you before, we have the same issue with access to information. We have a much stronger message control than we were used to. So first, it's hard to get information from the government. Journalists from all newsrooms tell that it's really hard to get information that goes deeper than a press release. And also we have a very special case in Austria. We don't have a Freedom of Information Act. On the contrary, we have the so-called Amtsgeheimnis. So it's, how do you translate it? Official secret law. So it's very hard to get information anyway. But this has been an issue for quite a long time.
But it seems that it worsens because, as I heard, the Interior Minister, which is also belonging to FPÖ, wrote in a mail to the police that they should be careful with special media and ask them to cooperate with them only if it's unavoidable.
Yes, that's true. It was some months ago. And now the Minister of Interior, the same one, is trying to really streamline communication, and, for example, also ordered police communicators to for example, always name the origin of a, if there is a crime, of the criminal, which was not, we were not used to that before. It was, of course, not obligatory. I mean, for the police communicators, not for the journalists. But we, of course, we also have other indicators that it's not paranoid to scale us down in the press freedom index. This is, for example, who is very much in the focus, which was also at this Interior Minister's directive, is of course the public broadcaster, but also Der Standard, which is a liberal daily newspaper, and Der Falter, which is a weekly newspaper in Vienna that is left liberal. And so what is done there is, you have to understand that a very important source of financing for Austrian daily newspapers is not the system of press subsidies, which we have, but you imagine it's about 9 million euro a year. But a much more important source is public advertising. So advertising by the government, by ministers, which adds up to approximately 170 millions per year. So you have 9 million press subsidies, but you have 170 millions of public advertising. And there are no rules on how to and where to advertise. So what happens, of course, these newspapers that are not, that are on the list, let's say, they get less and less advertising, which is very hard for them. The very liberal Standard, this is the next maybe interesting issue, is indirectly attacked by a new law that is now in negotiation, and it's a law against anonymity in the internet. So you have to, so it requires every medium to take care that only people who are registered, but not only with their email address, but also with a legal, with a passport or with a telephone number, can post online in their discussion forums. This is very important because Der Standard has a huge community. I would say one of the largest communities worldwide. You have to imagine that the Standard online has about 25,000 postings a day, and a team of about 15 people moderating this community. So actually, it's an example of how to deal with audience engagement and how to deal with online hate speech. And now, what is the draft law? What would it do? It would focus very much on media. Of course, the idea behind this, or the communicated idea, is to regulate players as Facebook or Google, but they won't care anyway because they will say it won't apply because we are not situated in Austria. But it would really target the Standard, and the Standard might be threatened in its existence because this law would allow to fee up to €1 million if you don't give away the identity, or if you cannot prove the identity of one of your posters, which is only, it's also not very easy to implement it technically and other things. So this would be prohibitive. Yes. What else can I say? I said, yeah, one thing, I'm sure you know all that, but maybe it's also interesting in terms of scale. What, of course, the right-wing party is doing here is building up a parallel universe of media. That starts with Facebook. The Vice Chancellor's Facebook page has 800,000 fans, which is pretty much in the country with 7.5 million inhabitants.
Sure.
And I wouldn't recommend you to go to this page because it's really awful. It's racist. It's sexist.
How many? What is the percentage in the last election of the FPÖ?
26,
Oh, yeah.
about. But they don't only use social media, but they are building up propaganda media that is disguised as newspapers. So we have a new local newspaper. It is financed by the Freedom Party, and people by the Freedom Party are working there. And we have several new online media, same pattern. And then, of course, if you have this lookalike media and you have Facebook, then you can do a perfect ping pong game. Because if media literacy is not so high, or the awareness isn't here, then it makes double credibility, because people think that these so-called media are independent, which they definitely aren't.
Let me ask one question. What do you think about the role of the Chancellor concerning this debate on Armin Wolf? He was interviewed by Wolf this week.
Yes.
Do you think that he really is in distance to this, what the FPÖ does to the press, or is he changing?
I think he has a different goal. I think the Freedom Party clearly wants to destroy the public broadcaster. I have to say that I'm coming to this conviction. I don't think that the Chancellor wants to destroy the public broadcaster or independent media.
But does he defend it enough?
No, definitely he definitely doesn't defend it enough, because what I think is that he and his party, and they are really strategically very, very professional. I think that they see a chance to have the public broadcaster attacked by the right-wing party, and then after these attacks have the possibility to have more control. Because that's what makes the pattern. The Chancellor wants, I think the Chancellor doesn't really, hasn't internalized this idea of the importance of a free press to democracy. And so I think he thinks that there is too much opinion in the public broadcasting. So what they are doing now is using these attacks by the right wing and the following loss of credibility, which it's not as far. It's still very credible. Still, most of the people find the public broadcaster the most credible medium. But this will decline, I'm sure. And then using that to make it less analytic, less opinionate. And what he's saying is, of course, I am defending press freedom, but. So it's a media politics of buts. So of course, I'm defending press freedom, but the press has to be more objective. So you can guess what it means, objective.
It's not a real defending, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's not a very strong defense. So I don't think that he and his party are on the line of destroying it, but they are seeing a chance of using these attacks to get more control.
Okay, thank you for the moment. I see that Attila Biro from Bucharest is also on the line now.
Hello.
Do you hear us?
Yes, I hear you perfectly.
Good evening.
I'm actually not in Bucharest. I'm in Berlin at the Axel Springer Academy. There was the awarding ceremony here, so and I took part. So hello to everybody there, and hello to our colleague in Vienna. Just wanted to add that I have worked with the guys from Dossier and Addendum. They're doing tremendous work there, and I think they will grow much more in the next period.
We thank you very much that you, despite of taking part in another event, found the time to take part in this Skype conference. What about the press freedom in Romania? We hear a lot of things about weakening the laws against corruption, but we don't hear so much about press freedom. Can you tell us about it?
Well, you know, the main problem is that you don't hear a lot of stuff about press freedom, because the mainstream media in Romania, it's basically in one way or another under political control. So I mean, we have the major networks, TV networks and medias, or controlled either by politicians that have corruption problems, either by businessmen that have corruption problems or were sent to jail. And there are a few independent initiatives, and just one commercial TV that it's not involved in this sort of dealings, and one newspaper that is called Liberty, that actually it's owned by Ringier. So this is why you don't really.
By whom it's owned?
It's owned by Ringier.
Ah,
Uh, yes. The
Swiss publishers.
exactly. So I mean, the situation, it's really on the mainstream, it's really dim, because of course, even though it's you won't see like upfront censorship, but it's out of censorship, because people know where they're actually working, and they're working in really under pressure conditions. This is like a little bit of the landscape of the media. We have a lot of new initiatives, but they are small. We have teams of maybe 3, 5 journalists, doing investigative reporting, doing explanatory journalists, doing long form journalism, and so on. One of the teams, it's the team that I'm part of it, the RISE project, which is basically an NGO that is doing just investigative reporting, and it's financed by crowdfunding and different grants. So we have a lot of freedom. So there's nobody that can control our editorial board. Um,
What about public broadcasting, or is there a public or state-owned, or how
Yes,
is it?
it is. It is, but the public broadcaster, it's again the board of the public broadcaster, the TV and the radio, are basically politicians. So there is no freedom there. It's like they mimic freedom, but they do not do hardcore news, and do not do present important news for the public as they should. And also most of the not all of the people, a lot of people that work in these public broadcasters are like civil servants, so they can be fired by these guys that are politicians. So it's not a good situation in that respect. But another big problem we have regarding the legislation. So now the corrupt and organized crime, they're using GDPR, the the data protection rule, to obstruct media. They use the judiciary to obstruct the media. We had just a couple of days, a newspaper, Libertatea, that I have told you, reported on the fact that prosecutor's office actually investigated a whistleblower from the public radio, and that whistleblower actually was also a journalist. So a journalist from the public radio gave out some information to another outlet, and and it was information on a corruption deal. But um, the prosecutors didn't investigate those information, but they investigated how the information got out, and they actually indicted that lady, and wanted to send her to trial. It's like, you know, basically madness to investigate a whistleblower because it's giving out information on a corrupt deal. The government now passed a law that will say that any trial, any corruption trial, any criminal trial will be secret. So this is something that they passed. We have constant harassment from the authorities. Harassment in the way that the tax authority comes in your office and does some sort of investigation for a couple of months. There's different agencies that do sham investigations. You have politicians attacking media that is showing how they steal money, and so on. We had, in the recent case, we had a journalist that was threatened by a police officer because she was talking about how policemen are getting false PhDs and plagiarized PhDs. So I mean, the the landscape, it's a little bit dim, but it's basically, if you look at the region, it's following the pattern of Hungary. So Romania, it's following the footsteps of Hungary in this perspective, and media freedom, it's worsened, but it's not as worse as in Bulgaria, let's say, Turkey or Azerbaijan or Russia. I mean, there are other parts of this world that are you know,
Still
pretty
worse, yeah.
bad. Yes, yes.
In the range of Reporters Without Borders, Romania has placed 47, so better than Poland, but could be better, of course. But what I found unique is that the Data Protection Office is doing anything against press freedom because they, as you told us, they want to get sources of the press. How is this possible? Is this Data Protection Office? Is it only controlled by the governing party?
Yes, yes, exactly. So yeah, they put in place a political person that was nominated by the parliament. So, you know, politicians from the power nominated a person, so they answer to political control. So I mean, but that investigation was basically has no merit. It's bogus. They will try to harass media in this way. But one aspect that I am positive of, which is, well, not a lot, but it's important that we are in the EU, and we have the, you know, the European Court of Justice. So I believe that any harassment, any misuse of this type of power will end up in that court, and that court will set up straight things. So of course they will use GDPR. They will use all the European legislation and national legislation to put pressure on media, because now this is the, you know, the age where the corrupt are getting more power because they, for years and years, they could get their hands on money without being punished as they should. They in Romania they stole money, and just few of them, they were punished, and now you see, we can see the effects, because they build up a lot of power, you know.
Okay, what you said is really very interesting. It's not a pleasure to hear this, but one last question.
Sure.
Before we want to go back to the other clubs very shortly, because we are running out of time. There is a struggle between the government, social democratic government, and the and the president, which is really rather liberal or conservative. Do you think that this struggle has any influence on the parliament on the election of the European Parliament?
Well, what is happening, just to get the context in place, the president prompted a referendum, which is a referendum on justice, because for the last 2 years, the Romanian majority, the Social Democrats and a small fraction of the Liberals, started to attack the judiciary. They dismantled the rule of law, they dismantled the criminal code, they put in place a lot of anti-graft legislation. So what is happening? The president said, okay, let's go to the people and ask them if they want to live in a country that respects the rule of law. I mean, this is an effort to put perspective in the citizens' mind. I think I will see exactly the consequence of this. The main problem from my perspective is that we had another referendum, really important, that was with a precise target a couple of years ago, actually in 2009, a decade ago, where people expressed their willing to to have a parliament of 300 MPs and not 600 or 500 that are now. And that
Okay.
that referendum didn't went well.
Okay, thank you. But we have to end very soon. We are very grateful that
and
you told us so many things.
sure.
It's really interesting.
Sure.
Thanks a lot to Attila. So we could still change shortly to goodbye. Good to Yaroslav, but only 1 minute, please. What is the situation on the European Parliament? Does the fact that the European Parliament or the European Commission started sanctions against Poland, or at least threatened with it, has it an influence on the struggle for election?
Not too much, because the supporters of opposition or governing party are stayed on their positions. We have a very slight moves in the fluctuation of the in the society on which party people will vote. So I don't think it has a big influence.
And the fact that Tusk is president of the European right, is this of an importance?
Not too much. Not too much to the country politics. But the most important in Poland, don't forget, we've got in September, October parliamentary elections.
Yeah.
And that's the fundamental moment.
Okay.
And we will see what will happen after European elections. The last polls are saying that probably opposition combined together will win with the winning party.
Okay, thanks a lot for you.
Thank you.
Philippe, what do you think is the main topic in the struggle for election of European Parliament in France? Macron is certainly the most outspoken pro-European politician. Has he support, or is the inner France politics now gaining? You have a translator? Yeah. Did you hear me, the translator? We don't hear you. You have to put it on.
Excuse me, Emmanuel Macron.
Now we hear you. Yeah. Very shortly, please.
You understand?
Okay.
Bien. Lui, il est sur cette ligne d'une Europe libérale. Donc, évidemment, je pense qu'il a son parti a toutes les chances d'être bien placé et de gagner.
So Emmanuel Macron comes from this liberal Europe, and for him, he will win.
Mais c'est aussi peut-être l'occasion d'élargir le débat et de montrer que d'autres points de vue sont possibles.
Maybe it is the occasion with these elections to see another points of view than the liberal one.
Généralement, les gens s'intéressent très peu à cette élection.
This is a problem because people they do not get interested or do not participate in this vote.
Mais là, il y a un vrai changement. Ils sont demandeurs d'une d'une Europe davantage sociale, davantage proche des gens.
Believes that today people are getting more and more interested in this kind of elections because they want a more social, interested Europe.
Je pense qu'Emmanuel Macron devra en tenir compte, lui et le parti qui l'a porté au pouvoir.
And he believes as Macron will be the winner, he has to take into account all this kind of social movements in Europe.
Okay, certainly the Yellow Vests have also an importance for this. Thank you very much, Philippe. So again, for the last word has Daniela. Could you also say very shortly what is the main topic in the election campaign, and is this struggle against media by FPÖ is it also a theme in the election?
Yeah, at the moment it seems that the topic of migration is going to the background in favor of discussing the media and journalism issue, which is also very important now for the elections. And some commentators say that even this having the climax now and this attacks against the anchor Armin Wolf is very strongly connected to the elections because it gets lots and lots of attention to the Freedom Party. Besides that, a short anecdote, the Freedom Party did a political advertising on YouTube, and it features a journalist that is called Almina Wolf, which is the female version of Armin Wolf. And as you can imagine, she doesn't come along it's not a very positive picture. But if you follow the rest, I think it's a match between the Freedom Party candidate Wilimski and the ÖVP Conservative Party candidate Kallas. And between the two of them, I think they are using their different positions to get lots of attentions because the others don't get any attention. Get not very much attention.
Okay, thank you, Daniela. I have to close the meeting now, but we are very grateful that you all took part, and we learned a lot of things concerning your countries, especially concerning press freedom. And I think it was worth now this Skype conference, and now we have to change to soccer. Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much, Gerhard. Thank you for taking the initiative.
Thank you.
Many thanks.
Strong applause for everybody.
Thank you. Bye. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Bye.
J'ai pas mis le son, encore une fois.
Bonsoir. Do widzenia.
Bonsoir.
À bientôt.